Winter, 1942. Britain was desperate. German U-boats hunted Allied ships across the Atlantic. They sank hundreds of vessels. Food, fuel, weapons, all went to the bottom. Britain needed aircraft carriers, but steel was scarce. Shipyards couldn't build fast enough. Then Geoffrey Pyke walked into a meeting. He had a crazy idea. "Let's build an aircraft carrier from ice," he said. Everyone thought he was insane. The eccentric inventor Geoffrey Pyke wasn't a normal scientist. He was tall, thin, and wild-eyed. His hair stuck out in all directions. He'd been a journalist in World War I. He snuck into German-occupied territory. The Gestapo caught him. He escaped from prison. Now he worked for Combined Operations. His boss was Lord Louis Mountbatten. Mountbatten loved unusual ideas. Pyke had lots of unusual ideas. Some were brilliant. Others were completely mad. This one sounded mad, but it wasn't. The problem. Britain-faced German submarines controlled the Atlantic. Admiral Karl Dönitz commanded them. He called his strategy the Wolf Pack. U-boats attacked in groups. They hunted at night. They struck without warning. In the first 6 months of 1942, they sank 3 million tons of shipping. That's hundreds of ships. Thousands of sailors died. British aircraft couldn't reach the mid-Atlantic. Planes based on land didn't have the range. There was a gap, a deadly gap. Sailors called it the Black Pit. Ships crossed it alone. Without air protection, many never made it. Churchill needed carriers. He needed floating airfields. But he couldn't spare the steel. Every ton of metal went into tanks, into guns, into warships. Pyke's radical solution. Pyke thought about ice. Ice floats. Ice is everywhere. Water is free. But pure ice has problems. It melts quickly. It's brittle. Bullets shatter it. Pyke remembered something from childhood. London butchers covered ice blocks with sawdust. The sawdust slowed melting. What if you mixed sawdust into the ice? What if you froze them together? Pyke tried it. He mixed water with wood pulp. He froze the mixture. The result was amazing. The new material was incredibly strong, 14 times stronger than regular ice. It didn't shatter when hit. Best of all, it melted 7 times slower than pure ice. The wood fibers insulated it. Pyke called his invention pykrete. The name honored him. Testing the material. Pyke's team ran experiments. They shot bullets at pykrete blocks. The bullets bounced off. They hit it with hammers. The hammers bounced back. The pykrete barely dented. They placed explosives next to it. The explosions only chipped the edges. The main block stayed intact. Pykrete bent under pressure instead of breaking. It was like concrete, but made from ice and sawdust. Pyke knew he'd found something special. This could win the war. He took his discovery to Mountbatten. Mountbatten gets excited. Lord Louis. Mountbatten was Churchill's cousin. He commanded Combined Operations. He loved bold plans. Mountbatten saw pykrete's potential immediately. This could solve the carrier problem, build ships from frozen water, save steel for other weapons. He scheduled a meeting with Churchill. He brought a block of pykrete with him. He had a plan for demonstration. Churchill was taking a bath. Mountbatten didn't care. This couldn't wait. "Prime Minister, I need to show you something," Mountbatten said. Churchill looked up from his bath. Cigar smoke filled the room. Mountbatten dropped ice blocks into the bath water. One was regular ice. One was pykrete. "Watch," he said. The regular ice melted quickly. The pykrete stayed solid. Churchill's eyes widened. Mountbatten explained Pyke's plan. Build a massive aircraft carrier. Make it from pykrete. Station it in the Atlantic. Churchill loved it. He approved funding that day. The Grand Design Pyke sketched plans for a monster ship. It would be 2,000 feet long, 300 feet wide, 100 feet thick. That's longer than 6 football fields, thicker than a 10-story building. The carrier would displace 2 million tons. That's 26 times bigger than the world's largest ship, 4 times bigger than the Titanic. It could carry 150 aircraft, fighters and bombers, a floating airbase. The ship would need massive refrigeration units, 26 electric motors for propulsion, a 15-story rudder. Pyke proposed freeze rays as weapons. Spray supercooled water at enemy ships. Watch them freeze solid. It sounded like science fiction, but the British were serious. They gave the project a code name, Habakkuk, named for a biblical prophet. The prophet wrote about works you wouldn't believe if told. This ship fit that description. Convincing the Americans Churchill needed American help. The project was too big for Britain alone. He needed Canadian expertise too. In August 1943, Churchill met Roosevelt in Quebec. He brought pykrete samples. He wanted to impress the Americans. The British staged a dramatic demonstration. Admiral Ernest King attended. So did other top brass. Commander Douglas Grant brought 2 ice blocks, 1 regular ice, 1 pykrete. He pulled out a pistol. Grant shot the regular ice. It shattered into pieces. Everyone nodded. Then he shot the pykrete. The bullet ricocheted. It struck a senior officer's shoulder. The room erupted in chaos. Guards rushed in. The wounded officer yelled. But the pykrete was undamaged, not even a crack. The Americans were convinced. They signed on to the project, moving to Canada. The project relocated to Canada. The cold weather was perfect. Canadian scientists knew ice physics. They chose Patricia Lake in Alberta. It's in Jasper National Park, deep in the Rocky Mountains. Winter temperatures drop to -30 degrees. Perfect for building with ice. A team assembled. British, American, and Canadian engineers. Scientists, construction workers, even conscientious objectors. The objectors didn't know what they were building. It was top secret. They just followed orders. Max Perutz led the scientific work. He was an Austrian biochemist. He'd fled the Nazis in 1938. Perutz would later win the Nobel Prize. But first, he had to build an ice ship, building the prototype. The team couldn't start with the full ship. Too risky, too expensive. They'd build a scale model first. The prototype would be 60 feet long, 30 feet wide, 1,000 tons. Still massive for an ice structure. Construction began in winter 1943. Workers cut enormous ice blocks from the lake. They hauled them with trucks. The ice had to be mixed with sawdust. 14% sawdust, 86% water. The ratio mattered. Getting the mixture right was hard. The sawdust had to be properly sized. Too big, not strong enough. Too small, wouldn't freeze right. They mixed everything in huge vats. Mechanical stirrers kept it blended. Gasoline engines powered the stirrers. The engines constantly broke down in the cold. Workers had to warm them with blowtorches. Everything took longer than planned. The cold reality. They poured the pykrete mixture into wooden forms. The forms sat on the frozen lake, like giant molds for ice cream. Each layer had to freeze completely. Then they'd pour another layer. It was agonizingly slow. The team installed cooling pipes inside the structure. They pumped brine through at -20 degrees. This sped up freezing. Refrigeration units ran 24 hours a day. They burned massive amounts of fuel. Maintenance was constant. Spring arrived. The temperature rose above freezing. The prototype started melting at the edges. The cooling system fought the sun. It barely kept up. They realized the problem. A full-size ship would need even more cooling. Much more. The costs were adding up. Testing begins. By summer 1943, the prototype was finished. It floated on Patricia Lake, a 1,000-ton ice boat. Engineers tested its strength. They fired rifles at it, then machine guns. The pykrete held. Bullets barely dented the surface. Some bounced off. This was encouraging. They set off small explosives nearby. The structure remained intact, just minor damage at the edges. They measured melting rates at different temperatures. They tested the cooling system's efficiency. They gathered mountains of data. But the more they learned, the worse it looked. The full ship would be far more complex, more expensive, slower to build. The problems multiply. The biggest problem was cooling. Even in cold Atlantic waters, pykrete would melt. Ocean temperatures ran around 5 degrees Celsius. That's above freezing. The ship needed constant refrigeration, in summer and winter, in all weather. The cooling system would be enormous. Engineers calculated the requirements. 30,000 horsepower for refrigeration alone. That's like powering a small city. The fuel consumption would be massive, as much as a cruiser, just to keep the ice frozen. The weight of the cooling equipment was staggering. Plus insulation, plus fuel tanks. Tens of thousands of tons. This increased the ship's displacement, made it even more unwieldy. Speed was another issue. Pyke wanted 7 knots. That's slow, but moving 2 million tons requires serious power. They'd need 100,000 horsepower for propulsion, 26 electric motors, huge diesel generators, more weight, more fuel. The numbers kept getting worse. The time problem, construction time, ballooned. Pyke said it'd take months. Engineers said years. At least 2 years, maybe 3. They'd need to build a massive dry dock with refrigeration throughout, where pykrete blocks could be formed and joined. They'd need thousands of miles of cooling pipes, meters of insulation covering everything, specialized equipment, trained workers. The cost exploded, from £7 million to 70 million. That could buy 5 conventional carriers. 5 carriers that could be built faster. That didn't need constant cooling. That worked in warm water. The math didn't add up anymore. The war changes. While engineers struggled with ice, the war at sea was changing. The Allies were winning the Battle of the Atlantic. New escort carriers rolled off American shipyards, one every few weeks. They were small, cheap, and effective. New long-range aircraft closed the Atlantic gap. The Black Pit was shrinking. Planes could cover convoys farther out. Radar improved dramatically. Sonar got better. The Allies cracked German codes. They knew where U-boats were. Allied aircraft and destroyers hunted submarines relentlessly. U-boat losses mounted. Dozens sank every month. By late 1943, the crisis was over. The convoy routes were secure. Germany's submarine force was broken. The desperate need for carriers had vanished. Habakkuk's purpose disappeared with it. Churchill loses interest. Churchill had other problems now. The invasion of Europe was coming. Operation Overlord, D-Day, planning consumed his attention. Landing craft, beach defenses, airborne drops, logistics. The ice ship seemed less important, less urgent, almost silly now. American admirals were skeptical. They had real carriers, lots of them, fast ones made of steel. Why waste resources on frozen science experiments? The technology worked, but it wasn't practical. Each month brought more doubts, more delays, higher costs, fewer reasons to continue. The project dies December 1943. The British Admiralty officially cancelled Habakkuk. The decision came quietly. No announcements, no explanations. Work stopped at Patricia Lake. Workers were dismissed. Equipment was removed. The prototype was abandoned. Nobody wanted to dismantle a 1,000-ton ice structure. so they just left it. Let nature take its course. Spring 1944 arrived. The sun grew stronger. The cooling system was shut off. The prototype melted slowly over weeks. It turned into floating piles of sawdust. The sawdust sank to the lake bottom. Local people found strange debris for years. Wood scraps, metal pipes, frozen chunks in summer. Nobody knew what it was. The ice carrier had vanished, like it never existed. Pyke's despair. Geoffrey Pyke was devastated. Habakkuk was his masterpiece, his gift to the war effort. He truly believed the ice ship could change everything, save thousands of lives, secure victory. Its cancellation crushed him. He fell into deep depression. His mind, already fragile, broke further. He proposed more ideas, stranger ones, more impractical. Military officials rejected them all. Nobody wanted crazy schemes anymore. The war was being won with conventional weapons, proven technology. Pyke became a recluse, paranoid. He saw conspiracies everywhere. His mental health spiraled. February 1948. Pyke took a fatal dose of sleeping pills. He was 54 years old. The newspapers wrote brief obituaries. They mentioned his eccentricity, his wartime service. Nothing about ice ships. The project remained classified for decades. Pyke died with his greatest work still secret. The secrets revealed. The 1960s brought declassification. Britain released wartime documents. Habakkuk files became public. People were astonished. An aircraft carrier made of ice? It sounded like fiction, like propaganda, a hoax. But the evidence was real. Photographs of the prototype, engineering drawings, test reports, witness testimonies. The ice carrier was absolutely real. Churchill really approved it. They really built a prototype. The story captured imaginations. It became famous, a symbol of wartime desperation and creativity. When nations fight for survival, they'll try anything, even building ships from frozen sawdust. Max Perutz remembers. Max Perutz went on to great things. He won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1962. He studied protein structures, hemoglobin, groundbreaking work, far from ice ships. In later years, he wrote about Habakkuk. He described it fondly, with humor and perspective. It was mad, he admitted, but magnificently mad. The science was sound. Pykrete really worked. The properties were genuine. But the engineering was impossible, too complex, too expensive. Wrong solution for the problem. Sometimes brilliant ideas just aren't practical. Elegance doesn't equal feasibility. What remains today? Patricia Lake still exists. It's beautiful and remote, part of Jasper National Park. The prototype debris lies on the bottom, 60 feet down, covered in silt and algae. Divers sometimes find pieces, wood planks, metal pipes, remnants of refrigeration equipment. That's all that's left. Physical evidence of history's strangest warship. The lake is peaceful now. Tourists visit, they hike the trails. Most don't know the secret. Beneath the calm surface lies proof. Proof that humans will attempt the impossible when desperate. The legacy of pykrete appears in textbooks now. Materials science courses teach it. An example of composite materials. Mix different substances. Get new properties, simple concept, powerful results. Students replicate Pyke's experiments. They freeze sawdust in water. They test the results. It still works. Pykrete is still strong, still slow to melt. The science hasn't changed. But nobody's building aircraft carriers from it. Nobody's building anything from it. The cost of keeping it frozen exceeds any benefits, except in extreme polar conditions. It remains a curiosity, a historical footnote, a lesson in thinking creatively. Other ice projects. Some people explored pykrete after the war, military and civilian applications, temporary structures in the Arctic, build docks from pykrete, build radar stations, build emergency shelters, use local materials. In theory, it made sense. Water and wood pulp are abundant. Cold temperatures are free. In practice, nothing came of it. Modern materials work better. They're easier to use. Plastic doesn't melt. Steel doesn't require refrigeration. Concrete lasts forever. Pykrete solved problems that no longer existed, or never really existed. What the project taught us Habakkuk failed, but it taught valuable lessons about innovation, about desperation, about limits. First lesson: elegant ideas need practical execution. Theory isn't enough. Real-world constraints matter. Pyke had a beautiful concept, a ship from ice, but he underestimated the engineering challenges. Second lesson: wartime desperation drives innovation. Britain was willing to try anything. Freeze rays, ice ships, whatever worked. When survival is at stake, nothing seems too crazy. This mindset produces breakthroughs and spectacular failures. Third lesson: technology evolves quickly. What seems necessary today becomes obsolete tomorrow. Escort carriers solved the problem Habakkuk addressed. By the time the ice ship could be built, it wasn't needed. The war moved on. The human cost. We forget the human element sometimes. Real people worked on this project. Engineers, scientists, laborers. They worked in brutal cold, minus 30 degrees. Frostbite was common. Equipment failed constantly. They believed they were helping win the war, saving lives, making a difference. Then the project was canceled. Their work meant nothing. All that effort wasted. Some were relieved, others were disappointed. A few, like Pyke, were destroyed. War demands sacrifices. Not just on battlefields, in research labs, in frozen lakes, in broken dreams. Churchill's other ideas. Churchill loved unconventional thinking. Habakkuk wasn't his only wild scheme. He proposed many strange ideas. Artificial harbors for D-Day, mulberry harbors. They actually worked. Brilliant success. Pipeline under the ocean. Pluto. Pumped fuel to France. Another success. Special operations units, commandos, paratroopers. They changed warfare forever. Not every idea succeeded, but Churchill encouraged bold thinking. Take risks, try new things. Some people mock his failures, the ice ship, other projects that didn't work. But his hits changed history. His willingness to experiment won the war. Habakkuk failed, but the attitude that created it also created victories. The counterfactual question: what if Habakkuk had been built? What if it worked? Would it have changed anything? Probably not. By the time it could be operational, the war was nearly over. The Atlantic was secure. The ship would have been slow. 7 knots. Targets could outrun it. Submarines could avoid it. It would have been vulnerable. Despite its size, torpedoes would damage it. Maybe not sink it, but cripple it. The refrigeration system was a weak point. Knock that out, the ship melts. Mission over. And the cost? 70 million pounds, thousands of workers, years of construction. For one ship, the resources could have built dozens of conventional carriers, or hundreds of escort ships, or thousands of aircraft. Habakkuk was impressive, but not practical. History probably made the right choice. Modern parallels. Today, we have our own Habakkuks, projects that sound brilliant, that attract funding, that ultimately fail. Flying cars, nuclear-powered bombers, hydrogen zeppelins, orbital weapons platforms, supersonic transports. Some die in development. Others get built and don't work. A few succeed but aren't economical. The pattern repeats. Bold vision, technical challenges, cost overruns, cancellation. We keep trying anyway. That's human nature. We dream big. We attempt the impossible. Sometimes we succeed. The moon landing, the internet, fusion research. Failure is part of innovation. Habakkuk failed, but we learned from it. The final lesson. The ice aircraft carrier represents something important. Not just a failed weapons project, something deeper. It shows what humans will attempt when pushed to extremes. When national survival is at stake. Build a ship from ice. Why not? We'll try anything. We'll make it work, somehow. That determination won World War II. Not ice ships, but the willingness to try them. Britain refused to surrender, refused to accept limits, refused to stop innovating. Germany had U-boats. Britain would have ice carriers and escort carriers and everything else. Throw everything at the wall, see what sticks. Some ideas fail, others succeed. Keep trying, remembering Pyke. Geoffrey Pyke deserves better than history gave him. He was eccentric, difficult, often wrong, but he was also brilliant, creative, fearless in his thinking. He escaped German prisons. He invented pykrete. He pushed boundaries constantly. His ideas saved lives. His commando training programs, his snow vehicles, his guerrilla tactics. Habakkuk wasn't his only contribution, just his most famous failure. Mental illness destroyed him eventually. The war broke something inside. He never recovered. But he served. He tried. He gave everything he had. That counts for something. That matters. Where we are. Now. 80 years have passed since Habakkuk died. The world has changed completely. We have nuclear carriers now. They dwarf Habakkuk's planned size, and they work. We have submarines that stay underwater for months. Aircraft that cross oceans effortlessly. Technology Pyke couldn't imagine. Solutions to problems he couldn't conceive. But the spirit remains, the willingness to think differently, to challenge assumptions, to try bold ideas. That's Habakkuk's real legacy, not pykrete, not ice ships, but audacity. The stories end. On a cold Canadian lake, debris rests silently, wood and metal, buried in mud. Nobody remembers the workers' names. Nobody visits the site. No monument marks the spot. The ice carrier is forgotten by most, known only to historians and curious students. But the story survives. The tale of an impossible ship, built from frozen dreams. A reminder that desperate times demand desperate measures. That failure isn't shameful. That trying matters. Churchill approved an aircraft carrier made of ice. They actually built a prototype. It actually floated. That alone is remarkable. That alone is worth remembering. The ice ship that never sailed. The weapon that never fought. The dream that melted away. Project Habakkuk. Churchill's ice carrier. One of history's most magnificent failures.